evening. I'm Donna Wares, and I'd like to welcome you to the September edition of the Los Angeles Times Book Club. Tonight, we're hosting our very first poetry meetup. And over the next hour, you'll meet 8 writers whose stories and experiences are entwined with Southern California. These are poets who turn to verse to explain and offer refuge during times of upheaval and uprising. Tonight's authors are Ahmad Johnson, Ashaki Jackson, Robin Coste Lewis, Khadijah Queen, Dodd, Natalie Graham, Kima Jones, and Douglas Kearney. But before we get to our live performances, we'll start off with a conversation with Robin Coste Lewis, the Poet Laureate of Los Angeles. Robin is USC's writer in residence. Her poetry collection, The Voyage of the Sable Venus, won the National Book Award for Poetry in 2015. It was the first time that a debut by a Black poet received this prestigious honor. After she was named Poet Laureate in 2017, my colleague Jeff Fleischman described her this way: Lewis is a poet who won't let you look away. Her verse reaches through racism and history. The best of it startles and amazes. Tonight, Robin will talk about her work and this moment of reckoning with Times Arts writer Makeda Easter. And now I'd like to invite you to welcome Robin and Makeda to the LA Book Club's virtual stage. Hi, Makeda and Robin, welcome.
Hello there.
Hi.
We're so glad that you're here. Obviously, this is a strange time for all of us, and I wanted to start off by asking you how have you been spending your time since the pandemic started the past 6 months? Robin, what do your days look like right now?
Sure. Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much. I've been spending my days in my childhood home taking care of my mother, and my son and my sister and I have been tag teaming. It feels really good to be home in my childhood community. I feel the safest I could possibly feel. So that's been extraordinary to realize, of all the places I've lived and traveled all over the world, that the place that I feel most refuge is in the place that I've been living since I was single digits.
And are you doing any writing at this time, or mostly just keeping things together?
No, I'm writing too. I'm working on a new project, and I just started teaching again, and that's been a profound privilege. It feels very, how do I say, I don't know. It feels really heightened, the atmosphere in the Zoom classrooms, because I understand and I can see with my students very intently that everyone's going through a strained time with regard to the quarantine and with regard to this great reckoning that's happening. And so I always have tried to make my students feel safe and understood, and challenge them to learn and to be open. But now it's different. It's, you know, I've always thought that I was teaching as if my life depended on it, but now it literally feels that way. And so there's a lot of warmth and kind of intense rigor in the classroom now, and it feels really good.
Well, I'm very excited that Makeda is here with us tonight. This is her first time at our book club, and what we always like to do is bring in some of our Times writers to do conversations. And Makeda covers the arts in such interesting ways, but for all of us at the newspaper, like everywhere, our jobs have changed so much. And so I wanted to just, before you started your conversation, I wanted to just have Makeda talk a little bit about her work, how she has changed her writing and her reporting. And I'm just curious, what are you covering right now, Makeda?
Yeah, so I cover the arts, and a lot of my work kind of touches the intersection of art with identity, and things have changed dramatically since 6 months ago. The arts have kind of always been in crisis, so I've always covered um, art institutions kind of struggling, but with the pandemic, that's been dramatically heightened. And so I've found that a lot of stories I'm doing lately are about dance studios closing or fine arts institutions struggling to survive and artists trying to find a way with very, very little funding and for a lot of them, very little hope. But kind of the bright spot is that there have also been these artists who are finding new creative ways to tell their stories in the midst of so much upheaval. Um, yeah, it's been a really interesting, sad, and heavy time, but I know that the arts will survive this.
Well, I'm so pleased that you're both here tonight. And before we dive into the conversation, I wanted to just do a little bit of housekeeping. Two announcements for our readers at home. If you have questions for any of our poets this evening, please share them in the Times Facebook page, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A at the end. And our partner for this evening is Skylight Books, which has put together a beautiful page featuring all of the work, a book club page featuring all the work of our poets tonight. So I wanted to mention that and point you that way. And now I'm going to turn the conversation over to Makeda, and I'll see you both a little later.
Thank you. Hi, Robin. It's so good to talk to you again. We spoke by phone. I think it was last year when you won the Guggenheim Fellowship. So it's nice to see you and kind of in person in this kind of interesting format. So thanks so much for joining us.
You know, I'm really honored to be here, and I remember you completely, and I follow your work in the Times very closely. So I'm really honored to be interviewed by you. Thank you.
That's awesome. I kind of wanted to get started with a little check-in. It's been such a heavy year, a really heavy moment. And I was wondering how you're doing, how you've been coping with everything that's happening day by day.
That is the darkest laugh I can possibly muster. With regard to the quarantine, start with COVID first. It's a very challenging time. I've lost too many friends. And if I talk too much about it, I'll start to cry and it'll be a really bad event. So I'm grieving some really brilliant people and also relatives who are still struggling with COVID and who are hospitalized right now, and mentors and things like that. So how am I doing about that? I'm trying to acknowledge and recognize that so many of us are in the same place. And I wish that we could have a national day or year of mourning, and that everybody tiptoed the way that you just tiptoed into this conversation to ask how we're doing. I think it's really important to ask how people are doing. I ask my students every single class. I take 15, 20 minutes just to check in with them because they're losing people. It's really easy, I think, to now just look at the numbers, the deaths going up. You know, when we hit 100,000, that was a big milestone, but we just hit 200,000 2 days ago. And I don't know. I need us all to stop what we're doing and mourn, but I understand that that's not going to happen. So that's what's hard for me. That's very hard. And about the tremendously exquisite protests that are happening, they fuel me and they give me hope, not only about humanity, I guess. It's not just, it's very easy. Americans love to reduce Black struggle into some corner as if it doesn't implicate human beings all over the world, but it implicates us all. And so all of the protests that have been happening and the conversations and the discourse that has continued, it's given me hope about where humanity might be headed if we don't ruin the climate any more than we already have. We might save ourselves politically and historically only to discover that we haven't saved ourselves in terms of climate collapse. So I'm scared. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry for your losses. Just wanted to say that. how do you, I guess you mentioned hope. Yeah, how do you stay hopeful? Do you believe in self-care, and what does that mean to you? How do you practice it yourself?
Do I believe in hope? You know, the great poet Gwendolyn Brooks says, "Hope makes a giddy sound. Dream makes a giddy sound," she said. Uh, I believe in hope, but I believe more in action, right? You can sit around hoping all you want, but human history has shown us for millennia that without action, you know, hope doesn't get you very far. So I believe in action more than I believe in hope. And by that, I mean very small things like I'm taking care of my mother who's very ill right now. You know, just feeding her oatmeal in the morning, to making sure my son feels safe in the bedroom, to, you know, you mentioned the arts. The arts are under incredible attack right now. You know, it's an opportunistic moment for certain infrastructural gestures, and they're cutting the arts. You know, we can pretend that it's all about COVID, but some of the cutting is opportunistic, and it's very, very concerning and scary. So yeah. What do I do for self-care? I don't, you know, that's a new word. I think that's a generational
Yeah.
word for me. What am I doing to take care of myself? You know, the stuff I've always done. It's not new. I'm a heavy duty meditator, so I meditate a lot. Uh, you know, all those things. I take hot baths. I go for walks. My sister and I sit at the table at 1 o'clock in the morning, having conversations, debriefing. What does it mean that our mother is dying? What does it mean that we've lost so many friends? How lovely it is that we go outside for a walk, socially distanced, and you know, they're great migration survivors in their 80s and 90s walking with us. It's extraordinary. Um, yeah, so my self-care routine, whatever that means, isn't very different from what it always has been, but I'm just trying to love everybody I come in contact with as much as possible.
Great. And I want to pivot to your time as LA's poet laureate. When you were beginning in that role, how did you define it for yourself, and what were your goals that you set out to achieve?
It's a great question. Thank you. Sure, thank you. It's a great question. Thanks. Well, I'm a Libra, so I often my ideas often exceed what the planet has in place for me. So my ideas were, you know, things that had $10 million budgets. So, for example, I wanted to do a Truth and Reconciliation Commission over 3 years using poetry, and I wanted to employ all the poets in LA and to go to all these different communities to take testimonies, like the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission started by the ANC. But I quickly realized that there was no money in the arts, and therefore I couldn't do that. So I've been figuring out really clever ways to do it anyway. My Guggenheim has helped me, but most especially a fellowship from the Mellon Foundation that was funneled through the Academy of American Poets. And so I'm still going forward with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission through poetry, and you'll hear more about that in the coming few months. It was gonna be in October. I partnered with LACMA, and we were gonna start it at the Watts Art Center, but because of COVID, we've had to postpone it until next year. So, and besides that, you know, most of my laureateship has been spent with kids, teenagers, elders, you know, that kind, the usual stuff that all the other poet laureates have done. I also tried to do. I judged a lot of prizes. I spent a lot of time with Get Lit kids, 826 LA kids. I tried to make my social media presence mostly about poetry and posting poems that I hope, especially in this year, that give some kind of solace to the readers, the usual things. But I will say that I thought about it as an office of public service, and that was profoundly moving to me. I took that very, very seriously. You know, like I didn't have an office with in the mayor's office, but my laureateship comes out of the mayor's office. But I often felt like the rest of people who are going to work downtown LA, that every morning I was going to work too, although my office was poetry.
And I'm so curious about this truth and reconciliation within poetry. And I know that you will announce more later, but is there anything more you can kind of talk about what that means in the poetry world, and yeah, how you came up with that?
Sure, sure. Well, you know, we're the only major industrial country that does not participate in the War Crimes Tribunal or the International Court. The United States. It's we use these quaint words like tragedy and all that. It's beyond that. It's disgusting. It's heinous. How could we not participate in a court that all other countries, the majority of all other countries on the planet, has committed to being engaged with and governed by? So that's always bothered me. It bothers me deeply. We're basically a rogue country, you know, and most other countries that have begun these processes of redress, right? Norway started with South Africa, but now there are truth and reconciliation commissions all over the world. And you know, if any country was going to perform a truth and reconciliation commission, considering our history, beginning with the occupation and slaughter of indigenous nations all over the Americas, and then slavery. So if any country were going to participate in truth and reconciliation, it certainly should be us. And I always thought as a child, I'm very naive, I always thought, you know, aren't our leaders going to step forth and do all this good work? Don't they want to? Don't they want to heal? Don't they want to acknowledge what's happened so we can stop living with the specter of slaughter in our psyches? Don't we want to move forward and integrate and acknowledge what's taken place here? But like I said, I'm really naive, and we know very much so. We know very much so that no one's interested in justice, and no one's interested in reconciliation or redress or even history. So I thought, well, hell, I'll do it myself. And how can I do it? And the great thing about poetry is, and why I think I won this fellowship from the Academy of American Poets, is poetry is really cheap. You know, I have a lot of friends who are filmmakers, and I'm always amazed that they have to raise millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to make a film. And I always joke, I said, I just need a pencil. That's all I need, right? Poetry is like that. So the way that I decided to, basically it's a symbolic truth and reconciliation commission where I use poems to offer communities in Los Angeles County symbolic gestures of redress, both in terms of the poems and readings of poems. Several poets, some of the poets who are here today are going to be guest curators. And you know, what's so interesting is that there's been so much oppression in this county, on this land, that we couldn't take it chronologically. You know, LA is the second largest city in the United States. And as such, it's also one of the most diverse cities on the planet. And we're home, and I love this about my city, we're a home to refugees and immigrants and migrants and, you know, fleeing every kind of war you can imagine. And so if I were going to try to go chronologically war by war, we'd be here until, you know, the dinosaurs returned, because there's so many people who have been, you know, whose homes have been obliterated by war. And then within the city itself, you know, there's so many communities who have just been devastated. You know, when I was giving my interview, I talked about Chinese men were lynched by their cues, more so than African American men in the colonial period in LA. You know, we need to talk about all of this horrible, horrible, horrible history that has taken place in this land. And so I thought, oh, you know, I'll put together poems and get my poet friends in the poetry community and several arts institutions, and we'll do it ourselves. And that's what I'm doing.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. This was a question I wanted to ask later, but this is, I think, a great transition into this. In June, after the death of George Floyd, there was kind of this outpouring of support on social media, seemingly support with the Black Squares and people pledging to do better within different institutions, within the arts, within academia, all these different fields. And I was wondering what you thought of that. And yeah, how did you feel seeing these things? And do you think that these industries are ready, the ones that you inhabit are ready to kind of to make the change that's needed?
I'm so happy you asked this question. I felt, how dare you? And it's so late. And George Floyd is a baby compared to all the other men and women who have been slaughtered and murdered by police everywhere in this country. It's lovely, I guess. Lovely's the wrong word. I mean, I don't know. I'm supposed to say nice things right now, but I can't. I can't. I grew up with police guns at my head as a child. I saw men killed by the LAPD and the LA sheriff. I saw that. My first boyfriend was killed. I can't throw roses at a protest that arrived in the 21st century when this has been going on for centuries. I'm happy that people have finally caught on and are paying attention to what Black people have been saying for centuries. But welcome and pull up your sleeves and do more work. We have a lot of work to do. Look what just happened with Breonna Taylor's murderers, nothing. So we can't start getting all self-congratulatory now. There's nothing to congratulate ourselves for. We have to work. We have to work. No time for the Black squares, as you said, no time. We have to really take our country back. Democracy is an experiment, certainly, but it's an experiment that we must win and we must keep animated at all times. All you have to do, and then this is the part of me that's a historian, all you have to do is look at the world. It's so easy to fall into totalitarianism and dictatorships. It's so easy. There are children in cages right now in this country on our border, right? Native American women are the number one population that's murdered every single year. Highest demographic of murder. Black women come second. So yeah, we can self-congratulate ourselves and put the stupid Black squares on our social media pages and take pictures of ourselves in mourning in negligees as if that's going to help anything. But the work is genuinely true, what we need to do. It is about elbow grease and sacrifice. The great Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation, he made this really good point recently and said that if your donations, meaning fiscal donations, do not hurt you, then you're not doing enough, right? We need to give, we need to help, we need to stay up all night, we need to boycott, we need to write letters, we need to text, we need to everything. I don't have any money left. I've given all my money away. I give every paycheck away. I do. We have to. I don't know about you guys, but I remember my mother telling me the story that she went for a walk in the woods in Louisiana. She was just out wandering, having her pastoral moment, and she came across this young Black boy hanging from a tree. He was dead in Harvey, Louisiana. Right? I don't know if you guys can remember all of these things. For me, they're in my body, they're in my psyche. So George Floyd, however tragic, was, we keep saying the same thing. There's a million George Floyds. There are a million of them.
And I mean, are there steps that you'd like to see within academia or publishing? You mentioned the Ford Foundation, and I know they just announced kind of this, I think it's $150 million for Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian arts organizations that they're giving away over the next couple years. Are there any steps that you'd like to see to make things a little bit better?
First of all, for the audience, I just want to say the Ford Foundation and the Mellon Foundation have just announced incredible philanthropic projects. And if you're interested, you should go to their websites because you'll be able to read all about it. And the Mellon Foundation also did an incredible pledge to artists. So Makeda, just FYI, I know you're interested in arts philanthropy. I think your question is about the publishing industries and the academic industry specifically. I feel like, the publishing industry, of course, like any industry, right? Any capitalist industry needs to be, reorganized without doubt. That was the thing that was so annoying about everybody coming forward with their hashtag BLM, to mimic a kind of solidarity. But you look at the boards of these organizations, your organization, my organization, USC or the mayor's office or the police department. I mean, anywhere, you look anywhere. A hashtag does not make me happy. I'm sorry, I don't care about a hashtag. I just don't care. I want real change, and I want systemic infrastructural change. And until we get that, we can hashtag all we want, but they're still going to be like, yeah, Black Lives Matter, but you don't work here. And I want real systemic change. About the academy, okay, so What's interesting to me about the Academy is that it actually was changing and was doing a great job changing for a long time. I'm a baby professor from the 80s and the 90s, and the cultural wars were profound. Um, and it seems like a lot of people have forgotten all those gains we made, you know? Uh, I mean, just think about the advent of African American studies, women's studies, queer studies, Asian studies, you know, you name it. All these beautiful departments started coming out of the civil rights movement, as they should. There should be more. Uh, and now, you know, people are getting a little bit more conservative, and you have to justify all kinds of things. A great novelist, who's my colleague, Viet Nguyen, who won the Pulitzer Prize, of the National Book Award, MacArthur. You know, Viet was talking recently about how he couldn't even do his dissertation at Berkeley on Vietnamese literature. Wasn't allowed. They told him point blank, no, you cannot do that. It's not a viable subject, right? Not a viable subject. So we have a lot of work to do, a great deal more. We're nowhere near, you know, we're nowhere near where I want to be.
Wow. Yeah. And I definitely want to talk about your work a bit. And you mentioned kind of these traumatic histories that live within our bodies. And so I want to talk about your work, Voyage of the Sable Venus, and just kind of reading about the background of the work and how you took exhibition descriptions and titles from 38,000 BC of art depicting Black women's bodies. I was wondering about your process. Was there a piece of art that sparked that idea for you? And what was it like? That sounds like an overwhelming amount of information to organize and to turn into your poem. I'd love to hear about your process.
Do you mean my process of research or writing?
Both, actually, if there's time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. The research process was fairly easy because racism is so prevalent in the art world, right? And in art objects and art images, it's everywhere. So it wasn't about the actual, my methodology was really easy. I went walking around to museums all over the world over several years and writing down titles in which there was a Black female figure. I say that it was easy because all over the world, there are Black female figures in Western art, objects, and images that have been rendered and represented and depicted in horrible, heinous, ridiculous, subservient positions. So that part was easy, right? Just collecting titles, they were everywhere. And I encourage all your viewers to just go any museum, any piece of artwork, go look, go see. It's like it's almost like what Western art had some kind of pandemic or rash, and it broke out in like, you know, visual images of hatred towards Black women and Black men. So that part was easy, except that it was durational. It took a long time, you know, because once I started looking, I started seeing it everywhere. It was everywhere. So I couldn't stop looking. And then the writing part of it, that was not hard either, because I don't know, it was the first time I understood what sculptors must feel. I could feel the poem inside my psyche. I could feel it. And so it was just, I had hundreds of pages of titles, hundreds. I mean, and like probably 10,000 titles. And then I just started, you know, going through reading them over and over again. And for me, a kind of narrative and ritual emerged for each period. It spans, as you said, from 38,000 BC to the present, but it really takes anchor in the ancient period with ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And, you know, that was easy because if you look at the ancient objects, they're telling the story of their own sick psyche. So I don't know, it felt very easy to me.
Yeah, and I know we're running a little low on time. I have so many more questions.
Sure.
I do want to, for the last question, I'd love to hear about your new work. I know when we talked last time, you said you're working on a book around Matthew Henson, the Arctic explorer, and I just wanted to know what inspired you to tell his story and how that process is going for you right now.
Sure, thank you. I'll make it quick. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be so verbose. Matthew Henson really discovered the North Pole, not Commander Perry, Naval Commander Perry, who has been credited with discovering the North Pole. Commander Perry was delirious. Matthew Hinson and 3 other Inuit men pulled Commander Perry on a sledge. And yet it took decades and decades for Hinson to get any credit. So, I mean, it's really profound when you think about it. Basically, a Black man and 3 Indigenous men discovered the North Pole, right? But it took so long for that history to come out, and it's still not well known, et cetera, et cetera. Matthew Hinson is just an extraordinarily beautiful human being. If you read his writing, you'll know what I mean. And his diaries about the 6 trips over 23 years that they took to the North Pole. Okay, so that's that. I'm going quickly, forgive me. But allegorically, a Black man out in a terrain that was brutal and all white resonated with me, let's just say. And it reminded me of the history of the African diaspora. But then I really got lost because I started doing research on the Inuit and the circumpolar diaspora and the First Nations and the native people around the Arctic Circle. And I had no idea, I'm embarrassed to say, I had no idea of the apartheid that had taken place there and the slaughter and the roles that the Canadian government and the British government played in, annihilating the Indigenous people. And so my book is now really more about, or as much about, the Indigenous populations up around the North Pole and the displacement as it is Matthew Hinson. And so then it just blew up into this whole project of colored exploration, how all around the world they've been people of color exploring the world. I was just reading about, Arab, the advent of Arab sailing and maritime navigation. So it's great when you're a poet because you can use these very meaty chunks of history to distill it down into, I hope, philosophical engagements about desire, safety, refuge, exploration, human existentialism. What does it mean? What are we doing here? And of course, and then I'll shut up. Of course, then you can't look at the Arctic and not think about climate collapse. You cannot. It's impossible. So, the more research I did, the more I realized, the Arctic tells a story, and it's what's so sad, besides the fact that we're all going to die, what's really sad is that there's so much history in the ice that's melting. Like, they talk about air bubbles that are 20,000 years old that get released when an iceberg melts, and it's loaded with history that we need to examine to understand the history of our planet. And so we're not only losing our future, we're also losing our past.
That sounds amazing. Do you know when we'll be able to read your project? Is there like a target date?
It's funny. I talked to my editor at Knopf a few days ago, and she said, Robin, the book was done years ago. And it's just you. So, I have a bit of a perfectionist tendency. I don't think that's healthy. So once I stop teaching, I'm going to give it one final rewrite, and supposedly I'm going to turn it in the spring. But we'll see. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you for asking, Makeda. I wanted to say to all the readers, listeners, it's so nice to be asked about your work if you're a woman artist. People often ask you, how are you serving, and not what you're working on. And I can't tell you how rare it is to have that question posed to me. So Makeda, keeping in with the very, very beautiful, strident, muscular work that you do at the Times, I want to thank you for that question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know if we're gonna go to the next segment, but I know we were gonna invite you to read a poem.
Oh, should I still do that or no?
Yeah.
Okay. It's so funny because I'm so happy to be here, but my work and what I'm saying is so not happy. And that's fine with me. I don't want it to be happy. There's no reason to be happy about what's taking place. But I'm happy to be here. So this is called Math. And then at some point, as you step more vigilantly into the middle of your life, you begin to realize that they are all dead. Or more honestly, it takes even more years. You begin to realize that perhaps they are not all supposed to be dead, or you still remember You can still feel yourself there, standing knee deep in cement, a particular square on the sidewalk. There were dandelions, that odd eternal sun, when a dear friend, your sister's best friend, drives by, stops her car in the middle of the street, and then tells you, screams out of her car window, and says it. Your first beloved, that boy for whom you were slowly unfolding yourself from inside outward, that boy whom you had yet to kiss, but would one day soon kiss, certainly. That monumental boy who smiled at you differently, that boy had just been shot and killed by strangers just for fun. You are 14, and it is the beginning. It is the very first day when the world confirms that new gleam of suspicion layered on the surface of the dark violet lake inside you that, yes, slaughter is normal. Slowly over the years, you train yourself not to want this. You, a body in your bed with whom you can have a real conversation, a body with whom you can walk anywhere, talk anywhere, hear anywhere. At some point, you gave up expecting to be understood. English was too many red languages at once, and history was just a very small one, a ledger, and always in the black. You took out your sheerest sword, your tongue a sheath of arrows. Perhaps not by coincidence, made whole. You and your sister find together the courage to do the math. Of all the boys whom you had known as children, at least 80% were all either missing, in jail, or dead. Blood on the streets, bullets in the walls, the police always flying overhead, in your head. You thought it normal when boys disappeared, were shot, killed, cuffed, or thrown into a black and white hood for simply walking down the sidewalk, or asking merely, what have I done? Normal, as expected as the orange poppies, your quiet state flower blossoming on the side of the streets year round. And then, finally, you and I, our bodies together for a few hours. Time loves me. Every minute, a gift so tender, each second announces itself. And then just as quickly, equally, each second is stolen, erased, washed away. You. I understand somehow it will be another 4 years until I see you again. We walk through the night arm in arm across the wet sidewalk, and besides my son, I am the happiest I have ever been with another person. But it is a silence, a happiness that rare, unexpected, quiet. And I wait and wait, and no one shoots you afterward. Or maybe this night was God's way of saying to me, finally, yes, I do realize you exist. And this one night, just this one night, is all the complete happiness you can ever expect from me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I'd like to bring back Donna.
I just wanted
Sorry.
to say one more thing, and it's important to me to say it. The poets who are about to read are my elders. They're dear friends of mine, and I'm the baby poet of the group, and they have tons of books out in the world and tons of awards. And when I first started writing, they were the people who embraced me and mentored me and loved me and read my work. So I just want to say I'm really, really honored to be reading with the poets who you guys are about to hear from.
Well, and we're honored to have both of you here this evening. Thank you so much, Makeda and Robin. It was really a wonderful conversation and reading. And we're going to continue now, moving on to our poet reading portion of the evening. I am really so pleased to introduce our next poet, and it is Douglas Kearney. Douglas is a poet, a performer, a librettist who spent his high school years in Pasadena. He studied and taught at Cal Arts and now teaches creative writing at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. His next book show will be published this spring. Welcome, Douglas. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Donna. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to read tonight with Robin, Amaud, J, Ashaki, Kima, Khadijah, and Natalie.
I wanted to, I think I mangled Ashaki's name at the beginning when I was opening, so I wanted to make sure that thank you for saying Ashaki. I was going to, wanted to apologize, and we'll hear from her in a moment. But first, we're delighted that you're going to be reading, and I was wondering if you could not only tell us what your poem is, but why you chose it, and I'll turn things over to you.
This poem is called That Loud Ass Colored Silence Protest. And I chose it because it could have been about 1965. Sorry. It could have been about 1992. Sorry. It could have been about 2014. My bad. 2016. 2020. Yeah, it could have been about any of those times. We are over, we are over, we are over, in, we are, who, oh, we are over, we are overcome, we are over, someday, we are over, we are over, we are over, we are not free, we are all afraid. Someday, oh deep in the eye, oh deep in the eye, oh deep is what the wanted, unwanted don't want. Oh deep are not free, we are all whole wide world, we are overcome. Someday, I ain't what? We are over, we are over, we ain't, we are over. We shall walk hand in hand. So we are, ain't, I am, we are over, we ain't. While lift up into dream, upended and marched into hounds to infinite elbows, or garden of a million clinched buds. The doubled box redoubles into sync, redoubt, and sinks into that old silencing right. What? Shh! I am, we are not, we are over. Shall overcome someday. Oh, what? Free. Hashtag Black Lives Stutter. Dog. I can't. I can't. Hashtag Black Lives Stem. Bow Wow says it all. Hashtag Black Lives Yammer. Ain't. Hashtag Black Lives. Bow Wow says it all. Bow Wow says what we want is to not be your what's unwanted, your what's or your un. We want what's what to be unyours. We want you to want what you want to want. Fireman points the water. Night and day, policemen work. Night and day, policemen work. That old silencing right. Why won't you?
Thank you, Douglas. Really a pleasure to have you. And now I'd like to welcome our next. I don't know how you follow that, but our next poet is an amazing poet who is Natalie. Natalie Graham is the chair of the African American Studies Department at Cal State Fullerton. Like me, she's a Gator. And she is the author of Begin with a Failed Body, her debut poetry collection. And I'd like to introduce her right now. Thank you for joining us, Natalie. Um, can you share a little bit about what you'll be reading tonight and why you chose it for this evening?
Yes, thank I chose a poem called Touching the Bird. And the reason why I chose it is because about 2 weeks ago, I have a brilliant, beautiful 7-year-old boy. And he asked me, because I homeschool him, and we just started American history. And he asked me, why don't Black people do to everyone else the things they do to us? And yesterday he asked me, who is Brianna? And this poem is in a lot of ways symbolic. There's a lot of symbols in it, but it's really about all the ways that I fail to keep death away from my little boy, and all of the ways that we try to protect our children. It's called Touching the Bird. A panicked boy calls me over to kneel with him, grabbing the air in his fist, twirling his fist in the air, punch, 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 then his mouth open, silent. The question he asks me is a bloody tooth and a brown napkin. This is the day's first brightening. Clouds swept off toward the river. The boy prickled with grit. Our shadows thrown over the dead magic of a half-crushed hummingbird. Wilted, silent. A tuft of a straw wrapper stuck under its little bird head. Tuft fluttering, feathers fluttering, its dead bird eye wedged out by some skittering insect, its dark insides open to the air. Legs, crumbles of brown straw, iridescent shimmer of its waving body, scuffed, murky blue. I roll the cracked bird onto the stiff curl of a magnolia leaf. It flops into its miniature canoe like a stuffed toy. You can't pray for a dead bird to fly. You can't even touch it with your fingers. The boy knows how death oils itself into the skin, knows we are covered with holes, minutes away from drowning or being smashed under a wheel. He knows a boy can't touch a dead thing without its soft little death touching him back.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much for being here tonight. What a pleasure.
Thank you.
That was powerful and beautiful. Next, we'll hear from Ahmad Johnson. Ahmad was born and raised in Compton, and he now directs the MFA program in creative writing at the University of Washington, Madison. He's the author of 3 poetry collections, Red Summer, Darktown Follies, and Imperial Liquor. Welcome, Ahmad. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, yeah, doing well considering the circumstances. So.
I want to just ask you to talk about what you'll be reading and tell us why you chose it, and I'll turn it over, the stage over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm reading a poem called What Spells Trouble. And, we've been sick long before the pandemic. And in many ways, the pandemic has just made our illness visible. And, when I get really angry, I get quiet. And I think it's a fail-safe mechanism. I'm just trying to check myself. And so I decided to read a poem that I think is a little quiet. Um, Robin talked about acts of self-care. And sometimes when all of this seems like too much, I'll take walks, maybe walk through a garden or spending time by the lake. But all of this violence seems to infect the things that would normally be beautiful. So it's almost as if like I can't kind of shake free of it. Unrest is a really strange word. Yeah, I'm tired all the time, but I can't sleep. So I selected this poem partly because of that idea of like these things that kind of haunt us, that seem to kind of like linger in the consciousness. What spells trouble? You have, since, swallowed so much blood. The sailboats wrap violently about the docks, and how heavy the gull's wings have grown. How sour, sourly beloved. And what shall we then call it? This consternation, a blue funk, some pestilence, which hangs or blooms or paints itself silently within the many courtyards of the body, or across that high court of the skull. What looms like another steamrolled peony or some pink paper moon?
Thank you, Ahmad. It's so different doing these events virtually, because if we were doing a live event, we'd have the proper time to pause and reflect and react as an audience. And I know that's a lot of how poetry and reciting. So I just want to thank you and really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you, Donna.
What a pleasure. Our next poet I'd like to introduce is Ashaki Jackson. Ashaki works as a program evaluator and social psychologist in Los Angeles. She's the author of 2 chapter-length collections, including language lessons. Thank you for joining us tonight, Ashaki. Such a pleasure to have you.
It's really wonderful to be here. I am revivified by my colleagues, and I'm just at peace knowing that art can still happen in times of crises.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be reading tonight and why you chose it? And then I'll turn the stage over to you. Thank you.
Absolutely, Donna. Thank you. I selected a poet to read this evening. I will be reading who I think is one of our great poetic historians, Yusef Komunyakaa. And I selected a poem from his collection, Magic City, because I was looking for something that captured 2020, which is a collision of nature pushing back and social crises and this theme of disbelief. And not necessarily disbelief from the people who have experienced these types of implosions over and over again, but kind of a disbelief in history, a disbelief of struggle and pain and kind of usurping what people know, especially what Black people know, or people of color know, or of Indigenous people, what they know. So I'm going to read Yusef Komunyaku's poem called History Lessons. 1. Squinting up at leafy sunlight, I stepped back and shaded my eyes, but couldn't see what she pointed to. The courthouse lawn, where the lone poplar stood, was almost flat as a pool table. 25 years earlier, it had been a stage for half the town. Cane and poor white trash. A picnic on St. Augustine grass. No, I couldn't see the piece of blonde rope. I stepped closer to her, to where we were almost in each other's arms, and then spotted the flayed tassel of wind-whipped hemp knotted around a limb, like a hank of hair, a weather-whitened bloom in hungry light. That was where they prodded him up into the flatbed of a pickup. 2. We had coffee and chicory with lots of milk, hoe cakes, bacon, and gooseberry jam. She told me how a white woman in the terrace said that she shot a man who tried to rape her, how their car lights crawled sage fields, midnight to daybreak, how a young Black boxer was running and punching the air at sunrise, how they tarred and feathered him and dragged the corpse behind a Model T through the milk orders, how they dumped the prize fighter on his mother's doorstep, how 2 days later, 3 boys found a white man dead under the trestle in blackface, the woman's bullet in his chest, his head on a clump of sedge. 3. When I stepped out on the back porch, the pickup man from Bogalusa Dry Cleaners leaned against his van with an armload of her Sunday dresses, telling her Emmett Till had begged for it with his damn wolf whistle. She was looking at the lye-scoured floor, white as his face. The hot words swarmed out of my mouth like African bees, and my fists were cocked, hammers in the air. He popped the clutch when he turned the corner, as she pulled me into her arms and whispered, "Son, you ain't gonna live long."
Thank you so much, really.
Thank you.
An honor to have you here. Our next, I'd like to introduce our next guest is Khadijah Queen. Khadijah is the author of 6 books, including I'm So Fine, A List of Famous Men, and What I Had On. Her latest book, Anodyne, was just published in August. And welcome, Khadijah. Thank you so much for, I think, are you on mute? Hi there. How
Hi,
are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing okay.
Really a pleasure to have you, and I'd like to turn the stage over to you and have you talk about what you're reading, and then take it away.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with all of you this evening. I chose a poem from Gwendolyn Brooks' book called Riot. And I think that it fits what we've all been talking about this evening, that it's not a new thing to be protesting for our lives in the streets. So I'll just read the poem. It's called The Third Sermon on the Warbland, and the epigraph is Phoenix. In Egyptian mythology, a bird which lived for 500 years and then consumed itself in fire, rising, renewed from the ashes. The earth is a beautiful place. Water mirrors and things to be reflected, goldenrod across the little lagoon. The Black philosopher says our chains are in the keep of the keeper in a labeled cabinet on the second shelf by the cookies, sonatas, the arabesques. There's a rattle sometimes. You do not hear it who mind only cookies and crunch them. You do not hear the remarkable music, a death song for you before you die. If you could hear it, you would make music too, the Black blues. West Madison Street. In Jesse's kitchen, nobody's eating Jesse's perfect food. Crazy flowers cry up across the sky, spreading and hissing, this is it. The young men run. They will not steal Bing Crosby, but will steal Melvin Van Peebles, who made Lily a thing of Zampuuji, a thing of red wiggles and trebles. And I know there are 20 wire stalks sticking out of her head as her underfed haunches jerk jazz. A clean riot is not one in which little rioters, long stomped, long straddled, beamless, but knowing no why go still in hell a radio, sit to hear James Brown and Mingus, Young Holt, Coleman, John on VON, and sun themselves in sin. However, what is going on is going on. Fire. That is their way of lighting candles in the darkness. A white philosopher said it is better to light one candle than curse the darkness. These candles curse, inverting the deeps of the darkness. Guard here, guns loaded, the young men run. The children in ritual chatter scatter upon their own and old geography. The law comes sirening across the town. A woman is dead. Mother woman. She lies among the boxes that held the haughty hats, the Polish sausages, in newish, thorough, firm virginity as rich as fudge if you've had 5 pieces. Not again shall she partake of steak on Christmas mornings, nor of nighttime chicken and wine at Val Gray Ward's, nor say of Mr. Beatley, Exit Jones, Junk Smith, nor neat new baby Williams, man to many. He treat me right. That was a gut gal. We'll do an us, yells Yancey, a twittering 12, instead of your death in the afternoon. Kill 'em, bull, kill 'em, bull. The Black philosopher blares, I tell you, exhaustive Black integrity would assure a Blackless America. 9 die, sometimes will tell, and will tell too in small Black bordered oblongs. Rumor? Check it at 744-4111. A poem to Peanut. Cool, purrs Peanut. Peanut is Richard, a ranger and a gentleman, a signature, a herald, and a span. This Peanut will not let his men explode. Enrico will not, neither will Sangali, nor Bop, nor Jeff, Geronimo, nor Lover. These merely peer and purr and pass the passion over. The disciples stir and thousandfold confer with ranging ranger men, mutual in their, yeah, this ain't all up in here. But why do these people offend themselves, say they who say also, it's time to help these people. Lies are told and legends made. The phoenix rises unafraid. The Black philosopher will remember. There they came to life and exulted, the hurt mute. Then it was over. The dust, as they say, settled.
Thank you. Really
Thank you.
appreciate that. Our next guest is Jay Dodd. So I'll say goodbye to Khadijah and tell you a little bit about Jay. Jay grew up in LA and now lives in Portland. Jay's the author of Mannish Tongues and the Black Condition, Fort Narcissus. Her film and performance work has been shown in classrooms and museums across the country. Welcome, Jay. Thank you. I know you had another event this evening. Are you on mute?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we go. I know you had another event earlier this evening, and were kind enough to juggle things and join us tonight. Thank
Yeah,
you
no,
very
I'm really
much.
honored to be here. It's funny when Robin said that she was the baby. I think that I'm the actual baby in this lineup, and truly honored to be among such phenomenal talent and truly accomplished Black poets. So I really feel like I'm the baby, so I'm going to claim that title and enjoy this space even more. Thank you for having me. I'm going to read. Huh?
All yours. Turning it over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to read A Brief History of the Present by Morgan Parker, another Black California poet and a contemporary of mine who I know I would not be writing what I'm writing without her brilliance. And this is from her collection, Magical Negro. A Brief History of the Present. Virgil Tibbs isn't arrested exactly, but the white cop in Sparta, Mississippi tells him to spread his legs, boy, and get into the back of the police car. Darren Wilson cannot find a job 12 months after the shooting, which left his round cheeks pink with adrenaline. He lives a quiet life. His blue eyes sparkle. He is a man who shot a boy. No, a suspect boy. Rodney King became nationally known after he was beaten. Journalists consider flimsy words ironic and alternative, fault and intention. Even angels want LA fame. On the phone, I asked Jericho how the South is treating him. He says, today he wasn't shot to death, and we laugh. There's no way a Black woman killed herself because everyone knows we can withstand inhuman amounts of pain. There's no way she didn't hang herself. Dumb, brown martyr, not mentally sound to begin with. Immortal, magical. Not like angels, but like drinking water, like roads. Trick question, is mercy ever justified? Aren't all masters benevolent? Now, please, use the space below to create a graph showing the price of water. There's no way we don't deserve it. In 1992 in California, my white classmates are like, aren't you glad you're free? Your people? What if you lived in the olden days? I've seen pictures of slavery, crude charcoals and watered down history books, and that's how I know I'm not a slave. A sergeant testified that Rodney King exhibited Hulk-like strength. His name was Coon, and repetition is a literary device. And paranoia is a weakness of the oppressed. We cannot be mentally sound. What began to leak then from the laceration was discipline, which for the slave is a tick of survival and for a nation is the practice of denial. What did he have in his system? Was it hunger or money? Was it glass, plants, voice? Death is the only cultural truth because there are fake marriages every day and even rappers are cooked up in an office in somebody's pink cheeks. Dylan Roof, Burger King, Urban Outfitters. I know it's just a movie, but I'm still afraid of what I see when I fall asleep. I know the masses ask me every day for a eulogy. I know I'm supposed to say shot and killed, say brutality to call my life a life. This is their language, not mine. This is not my mouth. Multiple choice. In what year did a Black man hang from a tree? Who is a nigger? Which of the following are Negroes free to do? Marry, own property, vote, drive, speak, bear arms, organize, revolt, be president, make movies, laugh. Which is greater? The amount of minutes it takes for requested backup to arrive at the scene of a 12-year-old in a park playing with toys, or the varieties of insects that might make contact with the person laid in a street over the course of 4 hours on a summer evening in St. Louis. How patient must we be? Praise the endurance. Or is it suspicion? Almost not, or is it suspicious? Almost not human. Who else is so great but the devil himself? I worry sometimes I will only be allowed a death story. No one will say in the New Yorker how my mother made her money, who I married, how my career began. Your people. The death story is just a name folded into another name. My name might be on a list or a hymn or a body, an investigation, a year, a lineage. I might become an autopsy, and the reason won't matter. Only my understanding, my swallowing of my rightful place, tectonic plates clicking like a jaw, and stubbornly, like history, my mouth becoming their mouth, speaking who I am. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Really appreciate you being here with us tonight. Just a pleasure. Now we'll move to our final poet, and that is Kima Jones. Kima is a Los Angeles poet and essayist who founded Jack Jones Literary Arts. She's currently working on her first book, a memoir. And I have to mention that it was this summer, it was Kima who suggested, why don't we do a book club poetry night? And that suggestion is what tonight's book club event has come from. Kima has been my co-host, my partner in crime on this, and has helped bring everyone together and pull this evening. It's been such a pleasure working with her. So I'd like to welcome Kima to the LA Times Book Club. Thank you.
So much for having me, Donna. Thank you so much for hosting me.
You had such a, every time we talked about this event, we'd come together and just brought together the idea of this event with so much joy and sorrow with the events as they've transcribed as we've been talking. And this week was no different. Can you talk about a little bit? Oh, go ahead.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. I was going to say it's really nice to have this happening tonight. Yesterday was really hard for me. I'm sure it's hard for everyone. Today was really hard. So I am deeply grateful to be able to read poetry tonight with my friends, old and new. I want to first thank Julia Turner, of course, Donna Wares, Makeda Easter, Jose Serrano, and the LA Times Book Club and video team. I also want to thank our poet laureate, Robin Coste Lewis, Doug Kearney, Dr. Natalie Graham, Khadijah Queen, Amaud Jamaul Johnson, Dr. Ashaki Jackson, and J. Dodd for being here with me this evening and accepting my invitation to read tonight. This is Jack Jones Literary Arts' first collaboration with the LA Times and the first poetry event for the LA Times Book Club, as Donna mentioned. I am exceedingly glad to bring this evening of Black love and Black poetry by Black poets who are from or who have lived or are living in Los Angeles to the Los Angeles Times Book Club. Last, I want to thank all of the readers and viewers for being here with us this evening. And I pray you found and you are finding comfort in our offering. I'm going to read Wanda Coleman, I Live for My Car. I chose this poem because I wanted to call our ancestor, Wanda Coleman, into the room. As you all know, Robin Coste Lewis is our poet laureate and the first Black woman poet laureate of Los Angeles. Wanda Coleman was referred to as the unofficial poet laureate of Los Angeles, and that word unofficial bothers me so much. And so in my personal life, I always refer to her as the laureate they did not want to see. And as I've been in the pandemic and experiencing all that's come with it, watching the violence, doom scrolling on Twitter, trying to stay safe and happy and keep my family safe and well. I'm thinking about ancestor Wanda Coleman and how she would have felt driving around the city, how it looks now, how it feels now in the midst of everything happening. So I'm going to now read Wanda Coleman, I Live for My Car. Can't let go of it. To live is to drive, to have it function smooth, flawless, to rise with morning and have it start. I pray to the mechanic for heat again and air conditioning. When I meet people I used to know, I'm glad to see them until I remember what I'm driving and I'm afraid they'll go outside and see me climb into that struggle buggy and laugh deep, long, loud. I've become very proficient at keeping my car running. I visit service stations and repair shops often, which is why I haven't a coat to wear, or nice clothes, or enough money each month to pay the rent. I don't like my car to be dirty. I spend Saturday morning scrubbing it down. I've promised it a new bumper and a paint job. Luckily, this year, I was able to pay registration. I dream that my car is transformed into a stylish convertible and I'm riding along happily beneath sunglasses, the desert wind kissing my face, my man beside me. We smile. We are very beautiful. Sometimes the dreams become nightmares. I'm careening into an intersection. The kids in the back seat scream, "Mama!" I mash down on the brake. The pedal goes to the floor. I have frequent fantasies about running over people I don't like with my car. My car is an absolute necessity in the city of cars where you come to know people best by how they maneuver on the freeway, make lane changes, or handle off ramps. I've promised myself I will one day own a luxury model. It'll be something I can leave my children. Till then, I'm on spark plugs and lug nuts, keeping the one I have mobile. I live for it. Can't let go of it. To drive is to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Kima. And thank you again for everything. Thank you for help convening this amazing group. We're at the end of our readings, but we have a few questions that we would like to share. I'd like to invite Makeda back. Makeda has a question that she wanted to ask to all the poets. I'll turn it over to you, Makeda.
Okay. First, I wanted to say thank you so much for sharing these really powerful poems. I'm really curious for all the poets, how has the pandemic and the past 6 months, everything that's happened, kind of impacted your creative practice? Do you find yourself writing more? Do you find yourself writing less or not at all? Yeah, how does that show up in your art?
So at this point, we're going to bring everyone back. We're still figuring this out. This has been our first time of having so many guests. I think we got it. So maybe we'll just start up at the top with Douglas.
Before I say anything else, I just want to say Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor. The pandemic, the oddest thing was, I'm thinking about something that Ahmad said about not being able to sleep. When the pandemic started, I slept really well. First week or so of it, like I was able to stop. Conversely, when Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd, not far from where I currently live, there were a lot of accelerationists, white supremacists in the community. And I stopped writing a lot in the months, maybe between like late April, mid-April, I should say, to like late May. And the day before Chauvin murdered George Floyd, I wrote a poem that was referencing the Watts uprisings. I wrote and composed that poem quite literally the day before and the next day. It's evergreen. It's perennial. It don't stop. I was most productive again a few days later when I started hearing about accelerationists in the neighborhoods. And I stayed up all night watching my house, watching the motion detector in the backyard, light, see if it would come on. And so while I was up, I just wrote. So I was super productive those 3 nights in a row that I stayed up the entire night. So it's funny how sometimes you can find time to write. But if the question is around ideas of inspiration or ideas of incitement, as I said, it's evergreen. I don't know whether it's reacting to, remembering, predicting, expecting. What is it? But that might just be me.
Thank you. I'd like to just go right back to our panel and invite anyone else who would like to answer. I think it'd be nice to hear from everyone. So maybe we'll just go right next to Natalie, and we'll just work our way around if we can. Natalie, did you have any comments you'd like to share?
I think for me, it's been a lot of just fear and being home and trying to take care of my family. It's hard to know what day it is and what time it is and what is supposed to be done and what has to be done. And so I think it's been really on a loop, and I've been relying on, external sort of arbitrary deadlines and sort of artificial, deadlines to get things done, to, accountability outside of myself, because it's been hard to really know what I should be thinking about and focusing on outside of just staying alive, and not knowing how to do that. It's been difficult, I think for a lot of people, but yeah, it's been hard.
Thank you. Let's go back to our panel, Ahmad.
I mean, no poems are being written. Writers are classically introverts and extroverts. Like I kind of need people so I can actively avoid them. And then think about them like obsessively. It's like I wonder what they're doing around the corner, but I don't necessarily want to go around the corner. But now I know that like there isn't anything happening around the corner, so like it's just like kind of stopped my imaginative work. I've been writing a lot of essays, and that's just a lot of just like kind of screaming into my laptop, just kind of really like slapping nonstop at keys and then like editing. I think on the front end, I really thought it's like, oh, well, like this is going to be like a great time for like meditation and just like kind of a deep dive in terms of really trying to figure out like who I am, and like none of that is happening. I tried to like garden for a little while. It's like, oh, like I do a lot of yard work. But the weeds won. I just like gave it up to the weeds. I was like, okay, I'm gonna step back and just let you do your thing. So, yeah, it's a strange time. I know like there's a thing kind of bubbling up, but I just like I kind of wanted to stop, but then I know that the thing that happened that was going on before the pandemic was unhealthy. So what I'm hoping is that this will be a transition into like a different kind of voice and a different kind of conversation. So I mean that's where I am right now.
Great, thank you. Ashaki, I think maybe we could go to you next.
Sure. Can you repeat the question for me once more so I can stay on track?
Makeda, I'll turn it back to you. What was your question? And
the short version is how have the past 6 months, everything that's happened, impacted your creative practice?
Thank you. It brought my creative practice back. I am a data analyst for physicians in LA County's Department of Health Services. So it was a stressful, fear laden situation to have a pandemic and work with physicians and try to figure out how to keep safe and how to keep them safe. So retreating into writing was that safe space. And my writing has loosened up a great deal, largely because it's, I'll use Ahmad's term, yelling. I'm yelling at the screen. I'm not code switching at all. I'm big mad and I'm telling the computer about it and I'm affecting it. And I'm so sorry, computer. I'm sorry. But people are they're going to notice in this new writing a lot of pivots where I'm falling into respectability. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Why did I do that? This is what I really want to tell you. So the writing practice is more honest. It's going towards unhinged, but it's intentional.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Khadijah now. I think she was our next. Did you have anything?
Yeah, I do. I didn't write anything the first 2 months. I am a caregiver for my mother, who is in the early stages of Alzheimer's and dementia, and my son is autistic, and he was dealing with a lot of other things like migraines. So I was just trying to take care of my family. And then my sister, who lives in New York, got sick, and she has 2 small children and no help. And normally I would be the one to go help, and I couldn't go there. So I felt like I was going to lose my mind. So I wrote an essay, Zuhitsu, which is a 11th century Japanese form of poetry essay, like an early form of a blog, because it felt like I needed space to write how I wanted to write. And I didn't necessarily think it was a poem, didn't necessarily want to obey the rules of an essay. So I banged out a version of that over 2 days, crying, watching Chris Cuomo and worried about my sister. Miraculously, Harper's took that essay and it was published last month. In between that, I have written a couple of essays for a local paper. I think I'm trying to write things that are useful. One of those essays was homeschooling techniques that can help parents as their kids are doing this Zoom classroom thing, and trying to help them to not panic at the new weight of things, and also understand that it's okay to let some things go, and that we should adjust our expectations, and that maybe staying alive through this is enough, that can be the work that we're doing right now, and that is more than enough, actually. So I think I'm trying to write things that are useful.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Jay to, if you'd like to also answer that question. I know it's a little going around to all of you, but everyone wants to hear from all of you, and we have so many great poets that it's really worth taking the time to hear what everyone has to say. Thank you. Jay, up to you.
Yeah, I have not written that much since quarantine. One, because the sort of project that I was working on before it was a kind of complete before quarantine hit, and so I was already in sort of a pre-production final edit stage of that. And then in terms of what I was feeling and had been feeling, increasingly, isolated and concerned about safety and being. But my fears of those things were already heightened before the pandemic. Just living in my body as a Black trans woman, there's been an epidemic of violence against us in the world, parallel to and in cahoots with the police brutality. The way we are also attacked and harassed on the street is fortified and protected by the police. And so there was already a devastation and an anxiety around being both out in the world and also just in my own community that I've been navigating and writing about before. And then in terms of navigating the isolation of it, I luckily am now over 2 years sober, but when I was an alcoholic, I just spent so much time alone and like fearing myself and fearing, what it would mean to stay alone. And so a lot of the worst parts of what I was feeling, I've already written about and I've already navigated both privately and publicly. And so I really felt this sort of lack of obligation to write new things. And I don't feel like I have anything really new to say because, like many of my colleagues have mentioned, so many of these things we're navigating are timeless, are evergreen, are future telling, are still prophetic somehow. And so, yeah, I felt really no urgency to write poetry. Anytime I try to write an essay, there's like a golem in the corner of my mind that screams at me. So I'm not trying to develop any long form anything right now. But I actually recently finished a rap album, and I'm going to release that next year or next month. So writing to music, and like, I'm not talking about the world in any sort of particular way. I'm talking about being hot and attractive in this life, and touch and intimacy and need. And that's what's urgent to me right now, because I'm denied so much humanity, so much every day, so much peace, so much anything. And I have organized before. I have been on the front lines before. I have been on the receiving end of police brutality and bystander violence. And so I do not feel obliged to say too much more or make it any prettier in this time. And instead, I think I'm just going to be a hot bitch for now. So, yeah.
Thank you. Robin, would you care to add to the discussion?
Sure. I'm reading my notes because I've been listening to you all. I want to echo what both Ashaki and Khadijah have said. A lot of my time is caretaking, and it's an honor to do so. My son and my mother. But I was thinking about, in terms of my creative practice, what I've been thinking about a lot is how much writing has so little to do with words. And really, I don't know about you guys, but what I've been feeling this past 6 months is writing for me has more to do about availability and intimacy to the world, and making myself available to sensations, realities of others, not my own, but those two. What people are feeling and experiencing. What does it mean to have a relative dying in the ICU who you cannot speak to? I don't know. I don't know what to do with that kind of information. Or what does it mean to have a funeral? Black people know how to bury our dead. And what does it mean to not be able to have rituals of death together? That's, you hear all these stories from myths about, some army, some warrior whose body was left on a battlefield, and, warriors fight like hell to go back and get that body. I understand that deeply. And so I've just been trying to feel every single thing and not run away from my feelings, no matter what they are, and not run away from the feelings of other people. I am certain, I know, I'm taking notes. I write in my diary every single day, but I've been doing that since I was 14. So, but, I take notes so that when the time comes, if I want to write about this time in a particular way, I will understand where I was and what I was feeling during this time. Yeah, but I forget who said it. I think maybe it was Khadijah. We're talking about this pandemic. We talk about this global pandemic as if it is over, and it is not over. They just predicted that 200,000 more people will die in the next 2 months, right? It could be me. It could be you. It could be any of us. We think I don't understand what this denial is about. We're so good at denial. We're so good at denial. But I've lost too many people even before this, right? In the AIDS epidemic. So many people have died. So many people have died. And to think ourselves immortal is just plain foolishness. So I've been thinking very gratefully, what I love about COVID is it turned the fire up around us getting out of denial about our mortality. This is a temporary situation, being human, and if that makes it all the more special. So I've been challenging myself when I do write to tell absolutely the truth, no matter how afraid I am to speak it to myself. And I've been mourning the lack of that forthrightness in conversations. Like, aren't you happy today that we're still alive? That's how I feel. I'm really happy. So I don't know. I guess the short answer is that I am in the realm of sensation, and I'm trying to hold it all. And I'm also really feeling very deeply honored that I get to be with my mother right now. She is passing away, and I know that that is such a profoundly rare occurrence right now, that you get to stay by the side of your parents' bed while they pass over. Considering what so many people now I am, considering what so many people have experienced with people dying far away from them and surrounded by strangers. It's unacceptable. I don't know how to let that in. So I'm just grateful, and, you know, looking at my mother's feet and her fingers and her wrinkles and her freckles, and listening to her voice and knowing that, you know, as with all of us, it's a limited time.
Well, I'm so grateful that Robin, that with so much going on and so much sorrow in your own life, that you would take time out to join us tonight. So thank you, and thank you for sharing your comments. I wanted to, the last person we haven't heard from is Kima. So I wanted to see if Kima had anything to add. I know Kima's been busy with her own project and isn't talking too much about it, but can you just chat a little bit about how your life has been?
Absolutely. So some folks know, some folks don't. I lost my father, my beloved father, 3 years ago. And last year, I adopted my youngest brother. I took custody of him after our father died. So he's been here with me. I don't have children, so I'm a new parent in that way. So this pandemic has really given me a lot of space to think about my own grief concerning my dad, to be able to hold his grief, my youngest brother's grief, us coming together as a family, figuring out our rhythm and the way that we want to live together, the way that we want to participate with each other, and it's new. And just the introduction of this kind of fear into my life, thinking about keeping a Black child safe, thinking about keeping a Black 16-year-old safe in Los Angeles. I live near downtown Los Angeles. And so the last few months was a lot of reaching out to my friends, to my family for support. It was a lot of listening, talking less and listening, asking folks how they're doing, if they need something, accepting help, which has historically been incredibly hard for me, but accepting help because I have a child in this house and I need support. I'm homeschooling for the first time and I need support. And there are ways that I want to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, so that he knows how to take care of himself, because it is scary and I want him to not be afraid right now, and to not be confused and not to question futurity every day in the way that we have to right now. And so just trying to find as much joy and delight in each other's company. We cook together, just board games. He's a musician, and so he's always making beats, or he plays guitar and the flute and he sings. And so he has his art practice. I have my art practice. I've been writing a lot, poetry, writing essays, writing short stories, just truly a return to my childhood practice of writing, where it's just always, always, always flowing. So that's been really incredible to make art alongside my youngest brother, and to be able to be family with him, and kind of model this new way of loving and being together. So that's what's keeping me. Alive and well and happy. I have to say I am happy. I'm very happy. I'm I'm exceedingly happy in the pandemic because I realized how much love I have in my life. And I'm really profoundly grateful for that.
Thank you so much, Kima.
Thank you.
We're running a little bit late, but I want to just share one question that came in from a reader. One thing we often hear from our book club readers is people like to know, they like to ask craft questions. They like to know how you do what you do. And so I'm going to throw this question to Khadijah because I know that she had mentioned earlier that she had some thoughts on it when I shared it earlier. But our reader, who is a subscriber to our book club newsletter, and she responded and said, I find it difficult to access poetry on the page. How would you guide a neophyte to engage with poems? Khadijah, would you share your suggestions on that one?
Sure. I give a very brief response to Donna via email, but I would like to say there are multiple ways to go about it. One thing is that's easy to do if you are not hard of hearing or deaf is to just read the poem out loud. And I think that delivering it in your body and then out into the air does something to help produce an embodied understanding that is richer than just looking at text on a page. You can also just like slow way down and let the words live in your mouth and in your mind in a molasses fashion so that you can sit with it. Poems reward that kind of patience. So I would invite you to just take your time with it and be patient with yourself if you feel like you don't get something, quote unquote, get. Often a poem's meaning is felt rather than intellectually understood first. So you have to be willing to tap into your emotions and your physicalness with a poem and its sound and its image.
Thank you. And I think Natalie had some thoughts on this as well. So we could stay here all night chatting with all of you, but I'm going to just turn this one over to Natalie to see if she has any additional thoughts for our reader, Shannon.
Sure. I think that the thing I think of is that their poems are as different as people are. And so if you read a poem and you don't understand it, read another poem and read another poem and read another poem. There's so many different types of poems and types of people and types of ways of expressing. And so I would never, if you don't get it, read somebody else. And I'm sure eventually, like, you'll find a poet that is connecting to you. Just like we have people we don't like and we don't understand and don't make any sense to us. Same way with poetry.
Well, thank you for those wonderful answers. And thank you, Makeda. What a pleasure to have you here this evening. Did you have any final comments that you wanted to share tonight before we wrap up?
No, I just wanted to say thank you again to all the poets for being here and sharing your powerful poems and talking about how all of this has kind of impacted you. It's been really great.
I'd like to echo that and just thank you for sharing so much of your time and talents with us this evening. Every month for the past year, we started our community book club, and we really try to bring people together to talk about books and stories and issues that are just important to LA and to, important to our readers. For this evening, I wanted to mention this again. Skylight Books was our partner this evening and put together a nice collection. They built a page and put together a collection of all of our poets' work. So if any of you are unfamiliar with these poets, I was very surprised that they not only featured our book club, but then put together such a very cool space for this evening. So I'll send you over there. And the other thing I wanted to invite our readers is to visit latimes.com/book club and sign up for our book club newsletter. That's the easiest way to keep up and of upcoming events, and also to tell us what kind of books you would like to be reading every month. We read together, we write stories, and then we come and talk about it. Thank you to our amazing panel. Thank you to Makeda, and thank you to the production crew. we're lucky we have the LA Times Today TV crew has helped us put together these events so that Jose and Tyler and his whole team, this is the first time we've had 8 guests. And so they helped us figure that out. And this way we can have more guests at our book club moving forward. So thank you, everyone, and good night.